So talking about export and import, is it a good improving progress of Indonesia and US? I mean, like sometimes Indonesia not do export more to the Americas area than the other, like China or maybe Europe.
Well, we're, I think, the third largest destination for Indonesian exports, and as I said, growing 16% last year.
Okay.
Our exports to Indonesia grew only 5%, so our trade deficit with Indonesia is actually grew 22%. Indonesia exported $19 billion to the U.S. U.S. exported $7 billion here. So I'd say Indonesia is doing very well with the U.S.
Very well. Okay. As the leader of ASEAN, again, that ASEAN and cooperation with America, and then the leader of the ASEAN is Indonesia. How do you see this? I mean, the potential of ASEAN country, ASEAN regions.
We're very supportive of ASEAN. We're one of the few countries that has an embassy located in Jakarta just for ASEAN. We think ASEAN is an important organization for establishing better relationships in the region, for increased economic growth. We're fully supportive of ASEAN, and it's up to ASEAN who's the leader.
Yeah.
But certainly with Indonesia being so big and important, it's a natural thing that, if not the leader, a leader.
A leader. Okay. Continue about the Indonesia as the member of G20 and the only Southeast Asian countries in this G20. Do you see this a good potential in Indonesia? Why Indonesia is being the member of G20, and how is the relationship again after this G20?
We think it's very important and a great thing that the G7 is now the G20.
Okay.
It makes all the sense in the world. And Indonesia makes perfect sense to be the Southeast Asian representative to the G20. It's got $1 trillion economy, growing fast, a stable, vibrant democracy. It's a perfect member of the G20, and I'm sure as time goes by, Indonesia will make more and more contributions to global economic policy.
So, is there any impact from the global crisis in this relationship between Indonesia and US?
Well, I think Indonesia, by continuing to grow and thereby absorbing a little bit more imports, is helping the world come out of its economic crisis. The U.S. on its own is finally seeming to come out. Unemployment rates are improving. The economy grew 3%, as I said. And yes, I think things are looking a little lighter.
A little lighter. Okay. So is there any potential of the entrepreneurship in Indonesia? I mean, the cooperation that you mentioned before between the entrepreneurs in Indonesia and the United States that would have a cooperation between them. Any program on it?
We're looking at how to do it. As I said, we have a program called the Global Entrepreneurship Partnership. And we're thinking to extend that so that entrepreneurs here can work with entrepreneurs in the U.S. to work together on projects. The internet's a wonderful thing.
Is there any the plan to invite entrepreneurs in Indonesia to go there to learn some things?
It's a good idea.
It's a good idea.
Maybe we can work together on that.
Okay, we'll be continuing after break, Mr. James. More of discussion is coming up next. Stay with Revenews International. Welcome back. I'm still with James Carouso, Economic Counselor of U.S. Embassy. Continue about the Indonesian economy that is growing so rapidly. How do you see this? I mean, what's behind this that Indonesia could growing? That how the government of U.S. see this?
Well, there are several factors. First, of course, Indonesia has a lot of raw materials: gold, sawit, rubber, nickel, coal. And you have huge customer in China. So it's a great opportunity for Indonesia to continue growing just by exploiting its natural resources. Well, on top of that, Indonesia in some ways was fortunate to go through its financial crisis in 1998 because at that time Indonesia restructured, became very conservative in the way it borrowed money, including people and corporations as well as the government. So that when the 2008 crisis hit, Indonesia was already in very good shape and in a very good position to sail through it because people had the ability to spend money. They hadn't spent money for 10 years. And they were feeling good because commodity prices were high. So the domestic economy really grew on the basis of domestic demand. And I think we're still seeing that. You know, you see loan growth in Indonesia grew 26% last year. individuals were buying their motorbikes and televisions, refrigerators, and companies were expanding so they could sell them the motorbikes and refrigerators. So it's all very good. But as we see all over the world, these cycles end. And what Indonesia, in my opinion, has to think about, as we think about in the US as well, is how to prepare for the next cycle.
The next cycle.
Yeah.
So what do you think about the next cycle? What it will gonna be the next cycle in Indonesia? What's the next step Indonesia should prepare?
Well, there is a program, as we discussed, for infrastructure development, because clearly Indonesia can't always depend on commodity prices staying so high. If you look at world history, commodity prices go up and down over time, and that will inevitably happen again sometime. So what Indonesian government is doing is saying, okay, we need to get our infrastructure in place so we can grow our manufacturing base so we can be part of the global supply chain. So the sooner that is done, I would argue that will help the economy grow faster and make the country more broad-based economically so it doesn't depend only on domestic demand.
So prepare to another ASEAN country like Singapore and Hong Kong, but their export-import activity. How do you see this?
Well, yes, in both the United States and many other countries, including Indonesia, there's a perception that exports are good and imports are bad. And of course, if everyone in the world has that attitude, there will only be exports and no imports and nothing's going to happen. In fact, you need trade. No country can do everything. Countries that try to do everything themselves, you get North Korea. Countries that trade, you get Singapore. So there's something to be said about trade that I think is beneficial, and all sorts of economic theories support that. So yes, you should support your domestic industry, but it has to be part of a comprehensive program that accepts that countries trade, import and export, and it's what it does for the economy overall that's important.
But how is it so far? I mean, the export and import activities in Indonesia, in only maybe in several sectors, like maybe the government and then manufacturing. So is there any potency in other fields, like maybe agriculture in Indonesia, because Indonesia starts to import the rice from other countries? Right.
And it's because Indonesia consumes so much rice. And the question for, if I was an Indonesian government official, I have to say, all right, do I grow more rice, or do I use that land, which I could grow rice or palm on?
Palm oil.
Now, if I sell the palm oil, I get X rupiah per hectare, which I can use to buy rice, or I can grow the rice.
You can grow the rice.
So there's an economic analysis as well as food security issue.
Talking about global supply chain that you already mentioned before, is Indonesia has the potency on it to like having the global supply chain like this?
I believe it does. As I said, we already see it in global footwear and textiles. Indonesia is a growing world power. You have certain manufacturing sectors like automobiles, which are growing very quickly. I would argue, again, I sound like a broken record, as they say, but it's two things. It's infrastructure and getting more graduates from your universities with technical skills, because I speak especially to a lot of computer companies. Indonesia is one of the fastest growing mobile telephone. You're the third largest Facebook user, second largest Twitter user. Indonesians love mobile technology. Indonesia should capitalize on that, develop more and more of its own applications, work more with global partners to utilize that base.
So do you see this like technology sectors will be the next big thing from Indonesia?
I actually do believe that. But again, in my opinion, it has to be organic growth. It never works when the government directs. It has to, the government should just set the rules and then sort of get out of the way. And again, I see a lot of American companies who are very anxious to work with Indonesian entrepreneurs in this area.
Talking about like what is the big plan in 2012 to strengthen the relationship between Indonesia and US. So what's like maybe the framework, because it's already March and like 9 months to go to over this year.
Well, we have our comprehensive partnership meeting. That'll be later this year. We also have a bilateral agreement called a TIFA, Trade Investment Framework Agreement, which is a way for our trade ministers to get together and discuss issues that are limiting trade between our countries. We also started something called a commercial dialogue, which is run by our Department of Commerce and your Menko, where we have companies from both sides, along with ministers from both sides, talking together again about how to increase cooperation. So we have all these strands of people talking back and forth. We're hoping more companies come here from America, but we also would really encourage Indonesian companies who want to go to the U.S. to see about investment opportunities, distribution opportunities. If they're interested, call our embassy. We're happy to help them.
We're happy to help them.
Absolutely.
So last question, what's your optimistic outlook, as your opinion as economy counselor, to this kind of relationship?
Oh, I think there's nothing but growth potential. As I said, bilateral trade between our two countries is only about $26 billion. With other countries in the region, it's much more. Even though Indonesia is growing faster, it has a bigger population. So there's huge potential there. There's huge potential for more investment on both sides. Indonesia, according to the master plan, needs something like $450 billion over the next, I think it's 10, 15 years. Well, I think U.S. should be one of the sources for that investment.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. James Carouso, for having.
Thank you for having me.
And I mean, we'll continue about this next. There was James Carouso, Economic Counselor of U.S. Embassy, and up next we have some more updated news and business information in Revenews International.